Let's follow the sequence of play. I'm going to try to stay away from the rule book on this, and no, I can't. This is only the harvest rules, which are more complicated. So let me open up the rule book for this first turn. I have it mostly in my head, but okay. So the first thing we do is we turn over this card. It's done. Now we fill what goes on the board. And so these dark brown are wood, the lighter brown, which looks pretty obvious right here, but sometimes it's not so clear, are clay. Nothing goes here. This is you land on, you get something. But this has the little arrows, so something goes there. Stuff here. None of those have arrows. A sheep. Sheeps are real squares. The big wood generator. And this mechanical task can be error prone because you're filling out, right now it's not too bad, but you're filling out this chart, and then these over here, most of these don't get stuff on them, and it's just very, very easy to maybe skip something and forget to put it. Not when there's nothing on it to begin with, but if there's already one on it, you might forget where you are in the place, and that's life. Okay, now we go to the actual play, the worker placement part, right? Now, all things being equal, you look and you say, well, I can get 3 wood, and wood's kind of valuable at the beginning of the game. It just turns out to be because your hut is made of wood, fences require wood when they come about, la la la. The other thing that's kind of important early on is food. Make sure you have your 4 food at the beginning of that first harvest. But that's a long ways off. Okay. But we don't know if that's what we want or not. So what we look at to figure out what sort of our game plan is our set of occupations and our set of improvements. Now, this occupation, whenever a take a grain operation is done, another player has to give you a food. In addition, you get a food from the supply even when you take the grain yourself. That's a really nice card. So I'm going to keep that forward for, maybe that's the first thing I play, because if anybody wants to get into the into grain farming, which is the only kind of growing, I mean, you can breed sheep, but it's the only kind of things that you can grow right away. I can throw something right out there that gets me food every time somebody starts playing with it. Puppeteer. Whenever another player chooses traveling players on the action space, you can pay a food to play an occupation. Wow, that's nice too. Now, right now this just produces a food, but you put this down and you put, again, a cost on another space for another player. The puppeteer says, I can just play an occupation. Playing occupations is, I mean, as we can see, this is a valuable occupation, right? So having an occupation out there is really, really a useful thing, but quite often you're not able to do it because this space is used up, maybe this one's used up, but it's also a little bit more expensive. Here you're getting this for essentially the price of this space. Guildmaster. You receive 4 wool when you acquire the joinery. I keep reading this as journey because my eyes aren't very good. That's this major or place the porter. When you play the joiner or cabinet maker. Cabinet maker is one of these guys. I don't have them. When you acquire Pottery or play the potter. Okay, pottery's here, and I assume there's a potter. Again, I don't have him. I'm not going to get him if I don't have him. There may be a refresh card, but I don't have it. When you acquire the Basket Maker's Workshop or play the Basket Maker, you get a reed. Sorry, 3 reed. So 4 wood, 4 clay, 3 reed. If you have already played any of these cards when you play the Guildmaster, you receive 2 building resources of the appropriate type for each existing card. This is, again, a nice capability. If I have the Puppeteer, he's someone I would probably bring out fairly early. This guy's got a nice hand to begin with for the early part. You receive a grain whenever another player makes the traveling players. Again, a penalty for other people. Sorry, not for other people taking this space. Scholar. Once you have a stone house at the start of a round, you can always either pay a food to play an occupation or play an improvement card by paying its costs. Again, a powerful capability like this. But that's going to happen late in the game because I need to collect up at least, first of all, there has to be an upgrade card for the type of house. And that's going to cost me 4 stone and a reed. The card tells you this. Right now, if I build more housing, it'll cost me more than that. To get from clay to stone, but before I do that, I have to spend 4 clay and a reed to get from wood to clay. It's a nice card, but nowhere near as powerful as this one, and because it's going to happen so much later in the game. Market Crier. Whenever you use the take 1 grain action, you can take an additional grain or vegetable. If you do this, the other players each receive a grain from the supply. So remember, this one is likely to leave the take 1 grain open for me, so these kind of work in nice synergy. This is a really good combination. And the Schnapps Distiller. In the feeding phase of each harvest, you can convert up to 1 vegetable to, I think that's a 5, food. Okay. This gives me a powerful reason to get vegetables, but vegetables aren't available until late in the game. Take 1 vegetable comes out in stage 3 all the way down here. So, again, a much later one. I am going to, these are the 2 most interesting. I am going to be considering that the Sycophant is my first play. Because take 1 grain is just valuable, whereas Puppeteer requires someone to hit the traveling player's space, and that collects up goods. Food is not the most valuable good. There's only 1 on there. People are probably going to ignore that and take other resources at this point. But And what I would be doing for that is playing here. It'll cost me nothing because no one has played an occupation yet. One of the advantages of being first player. Now, of course, I could have grabbed 3 wood, But let's keep going. Now let's look at the minor improvements, because I could grab one of them here and prevent anyone else from taking the starting player this round. Quarry. Takes 4 occupations to play. I may get this eventually with my hand. You can use whenever you use the day laborer action, you receive an additional 3 stone. Wow, that's huge. It's really hard to get stone, especially early in the game. Now, 4 occupations means it's not going to be too early in the game. This is worth 2 victory points as well, which is not bad. A lot of these are worth victory points. Scarecrow requires 2 empty fields in your hand, so you could actually lose the qualifications for this easily. Whenever you sow, you can pay a wood and sow 2 grain instead of 1 on an empty field. This is one I'd have to look up. Actually, they show it here, don't they? They show a picture representation. And it looks like there's 6 grain placed on this space. So I would look that up to make sure, but I think your 1 grain normally produces 2. Now your 2 grain is going to produce 4. And that only works for 1 field at a time. Fish trap. Just cost me a wood. Whenever you use fishing, you get a or receive a reed from the action space that provides reed. You get an extra food. That can be valuable. Food is, important in the game. This is a cheap improvement that maybe I'd want to play. I'm going to keep this one to the side. Simple fireplace only costs a clay. Now this is similar to some of these. It's worth 1 victory point, which these are worth. And it's almost as good. Sheep don't cook as well. But it has all the functionality for producing food, which is at any time. And when you use baked bread, you can convert 1 grain to 2 food, which is probably not worth it. Now, I'm not going to play either of these because I don't have the resources involved, actually. They're interesting for later, but they're not possible right now. But they're interesting in the near term. Slaughterhouse, whenever another player turns 1 or more animals into food, you get a food from the supply. During the feeding phase of the harvest, you are the last player to take a turn so that you get the food out of the harvest. That's kind of nice. It's worth 2 victory points. It's kind of expensive, but not terribly so. 2 clay and 2 stone. What I'm most interested in here, though, is the quarry. That's sort of right now, I'm aiming for that longer term. And I have cards that'll help me get that. The crap pond. You need an occupation and 2 improvements before you can play this, so it's much later. Now, 1 food gets placed on each odd-numbered round space. At the start of these rounds, you receive the food. That'll get placed on these cards that haven't been used yet. And unfortunately, the numbers are under the cards. There's a reason, you know what? I'm going to put these, they're supposed to be done this way. I'm not going to cover the space because you have to be able to read the numbers on the round spaces. So these are preset. They're in the same situation. And that way I can see the numbers. And now I understand why you don't put the cards out to begin with. Okay. So this produces 1 food every other turn for you when you get it. But although it has no cost, it's not a right-away card. And the shepherd's pipe. You have to have a sheep for this. You can hold 2 additional sheep in each of the pastures where you keep sheep. You can keep up to 2 sheep in each unfenced stable. Okay, so what has this done? Well, a pasture is, I believe, an area surrounded by fencing. So once I have some fencing and a sheep, I get a couple extra sheep in the pastures. It's not per field. And I can get an extra sheep anywhere where I've built a stable, although that's pretty unlikely. Stables without fields don't make sense. So those are the cards that I have. I think what I've decided is I'm going to play the free occupation card, turn the sycophant up, which means I've just gotten in the way of other people's grain capabilities. I want to get those traveling players up too, though, and that's kind of painful. That's the end of the blue player turn, and we'll go over to purple. Now, I think it's worth looking at each player in turn for their occupation cards, etc. Although maybe I'll spend a little bit less time, drilling into them. But this is where the concept of how that player is going to kind of aim their game comes about. This is not the space I would have landed on first. I got to tell you, I would have gone for the pile of wood normally. But this occupation seems worth grabbing. Although it's unlikely anybody's going to take a grain right now, what I learned from the last game was that it was hard to get to a point where you wanted to take that grain. So somebody late in the turn might have taken that grain. It's certainly more valuable than taking a single food, for example. Start getting your grain production working. I never got my grain production working on most of my players. One of them got it running late in the game. Grain production is kind of nice because it creates fields. You end up plowing a lot of fields. And so is animal production. So you end up not getting penalized for all these spaces. It is possible to run your farm okay and figure out ways to get yourself working off of, just your improvements and the stuff that you draw in these and occupations and whatnot, and not use a whole hell of a lot of your farmland up. But you're paying a penalty for that. So if you're choosing different, pathways through the game, it might be favorable to start doing some actual farming instead of, being a guy who works his day job in the city and comes home and tries to farm on weekends. Speaking of which, there's the farm game. And I'm toying with the idea of playing that after this. It's a horrible game. I know somebody who likes it, but I can't imagine. I think they only like it because it has the color form stickers on it, which is kind of cool. There's no question about that. But all right, I'm going to pause here because I went into so much depth in that player, and I have work to get to. I did want to jump in and talk about something that I should have hit in the intro. One of the reasons that these games are particularly hard for me is that I play them solo. And I walk away. So I've done all this thinking about this guy. I know what his plan kind of is, sort of, having to do with the occupation, some of the minor improvements. But by playing solo, even if I was sitting here at one time, 4 different players, I look at 3 different players' positions, I come back here, and I'm trying to figure out what this guy is up to, right? Maybe I should write something down or something. Worse than that is I have a tendency to play maybe 1 round and walk away. And, this is not the natural situation, right? When you'd normally be playing this, you'd be sitting at a table with, 3, 4 other people, whatever, and kind of know what you're doing until your turn comes around. It's a similar situation to Age of Renaissance over there, where you have to kind of keep in mind what you're trying to do. I gotta say though, even when I'm sitting up at a table playing an opposed game, I have trouble keeping my mind on what the little strategy is that I've figured out how to do. That probably wouldn't be so bad. It depends on the number of players, I think. If I'm playing a 2-player, it's probably going to work okay. But the more people at the table, the more complex the decisions, etc., the more likely I'm just going to lose track of whatever the fuck I was trying to do. Because for me, gaming's got a certain social aspect to it. With other people, and maybe even alone, but we'll leave that alone. But yeah, gaming with other people, since I do so much solo gaming and I have no problem with it across the board, when I'm playing with others, often a big part of it is that social experience with other people. I'm not there to spend every minute when I'm not doing anything, trying to look at the board and figure out what I'm doing, what my best options are, trying to keep my strategy in mind and all that. And when a game requires a lot of processing to understand what the best moves are, and this one requires a fair amount, and there's no intuitive feel to it all, right? I mean, you could say, well, you know, I want to grow wheat and vegetables and animals and do work and have children and build house. All of that makes sense and everything, but it only makes sense and can only be thought about in terms of the numbers here. There's no obvious, it's not like an 18xx game, for example, where you can say, so I need money in my company, but I also would like to be getting my stock value up. You've got a clear priority there. Here you've got a clear priority with one thing. Make sure you get your people fed. That was not obvious, though, the first time playing, right? It also wasn't necessarily obvious what I need to do to get my people fed. Because if you go the wheat route, it's painful. You got to bake bread, and that's an operation. That's an action that you choose. And that ends up costing you in a way that other pathways to feeding your family, like being a cabinet maker or something, things that come from the occupations generally, but also animals. Animals turn into food really easily. They take a lot less work. And for that matter, vegetables take less work as well. Grain is the painful route, but it's the most potentially valuable in terms of how much food you could create. So you can do a baked food or a baked bread operation, and you can get 5 food for 1 grain, or here 2 grain gives you only 4 food, which I don't know. Or does that mean you can do it twice? See, I don't know what's going on here. Whenever you use it, you can turn up to 2 grain into 4 food each. Yeah. Up here, these are you can convert grain, and they appear to happen infinitely, which is a little weird. But some of these have a limit. You can only do it X number of times. Anyway. So I've spent enough time looking at that. Hey, why are these games particularly hard for me? Well, part of it is the way that I play the game solo, but honestly, these kind of games don't come easily to me anyhow. And it's a little weird because I'll be sitting there with people who have similar gaming tastes to me in a lot of different ways and have no problem playing some of these. Some of them have, I don't know. I'm always, so I might have a few buddies who are like as lost as I am, but don't care about it. I know that I've played games of Age of Renaissance, and that's a great example of this type of game, where you have, it's not worker placement or anything, but you have to balance all this kind of, same kind of information that you do in a worker placement game. Who are doing just as poorly as I am, but don't seem, they're generally not competitive in games, right? They don't tend to optimize very well across the board, or they're saying, well, I just don't get this game, but then they just have fun. I'm not that kind of person. I'm the kind of person who wants to talk to people and stuff, but I also feel like optimization usually comes pretty easily to me in games. And these guys with their menu of choices to take, that's huge, and is sort of constantly being changed by other players and whatnot, and there's little or no intuitive drive as to what I'm trying to do. And there is intuitive drive in Age of Renaissance, which is kind of weird. These just, I don't get that intuitive grasp. I have to it may be that I have to play the game so many times to get used to it or something, because I don't really remember. I know in Puerto Rico, for example, probably my first play of it, I was kind of scratching my head and saying, yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on. But by the end of the play, I had an idea what I wanted to do. This game, I didn't know what I wanted to do at all until I got to the scoring and started to realize, well, okay, so this guy looked like he was doing okay, but he failed for this reason, like running out of food, or, and I was shocked by, what ended up scoring points and whatever when I started looking at those values. It's a matter of you have to decipher the point salad to a great degree rather than trying to use common sense to understand what works. So stuff like stockpiles of food, wood, clay, this stuff matters or doesn't matter at the end of the game. It can help get you to a good position. I gotta swap batteries. And it might be a viable path to your victory, but it's not counting to your victory itself, which means you have to take these items and do something that gets you points with them, or else they're a waste. If they are your engine, right? You have to figure out how to convert them. But on the other hand, things that feel very similar, animals and grain and vegetable seeds, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to tell because grain and vegetable that you have in your stock can, and this makes sense with grain, can be used as seeds in the plow field or used for food. But I gotta tell you, take a vegetable as an example. Let's say you have zucchini, you take some of the seeds out and you store them, and that doesn't prevent you from eating the vegetable as well. It's just a matter of additional work to prepare the vegetable to get the seeds out. Unlike grain where you're eating the seed, you're really not eating the seed to a vegetable. But yeah, I mean, if you're just chopping up vegetable matter and throwing it into the ground for your yearly farming or whatever, that too will work. It's not as efficient. But anyway, what I was getting at is things that don't necessarily seem terribly sustainable. Like, I could have a big old wood pile, and I feel like I've got a resource there that'll last for a long time. If I got a bunch of zucchini or pumpkins or whatever, or tomatoes, I got to do something with them real fast. They have a short shelf life. Grain a little bit longer, seeds themselves a little bit longer as well, but the vegetable is not something that I keep through the years. Then if we look, very interestingly, something which could be semi-preserved, right? Not sure. It claims to be 17th century here. Yeah. So I've put it in my Age of Reason games. But food, which could be cured meats, pickled goods, it could be canning in jars and whatnot. All of that's possible for food, dried foods, etc. It's all possible that your food could last a reasonably long time. Now, nothing spoils in this game, unlike I keep bringing up After the Holocaust, where there is spoilage. But you don't have to do anything. Whatever you do to make your food, it lasts forever. Food's a very important resource in the game, So are these others, the wood, the clay, the reeds. Food is generally not transmittable directly into anything. So you might have cards that allow you to transmit wood into food kind of at will. And you build stuff with these other materials, like that build stuff that creates victory points. Food, you don't build stuff that creates victory points. But I mean, the point is that like certain intermediate steps, the vegetables and the animals, are worth victory points. Others aren't. So you can't just walk into it, say, I'm going to build up my engine, and maybe I'm not absolutely optimizing the points that I get out of it, but the intermediate steps are worth something. No, you have to fully understand the point score and realize that you actually want these intermediate steps. You want to have vegetables and grain and all three animals and, you know, all in hand. And you kind of scratch your head and say, I can't figure out what the victory points are meant to represent. I don't think they're meant to represent anything. I think they're meant to create, balance and challenge and stuff like that. That's important from a gameplay point of view, but it's very hard to link them to any kind of reality. So, this is the kind of thing when people say, oh, it oozes with theme. I'm like, oh yeah, all the cards link to what they're supposed to do, all this, but why is it theme and not addressing the subject matter? It's theme because your thought processes do not lead you to by taking on the concept of what you're doing, your thought processes don't lead you to a solution that optimizes your victory points in any sort of the way, right? So 18xx may not ooze theme because it doesn't, it's a fairly abstract representation in a lot of ways, but what it does right in the sense of linking to reality, right? So you're sitting there and you're investing in stocks and you're improving your company, and as your company improves, it makes more money, which drives your stock value up and gives you, cash in your pocket in the form of dividends and all this sort of stuff that makes perfect sense. Here, you got a bunch of stuff that's thematic in the sense that it makes you think that you're doing farming type stuff, right? I'm dealing in clay, I've got to go do a day job as a sycophant, whatever the hell, but none of it really fits together. The overall view of it just doesn't give you something that gives you any kind of insight into farming. I mean, it's just all theme. None of it is related to the subject. I'm not sure how to do this in a lighter fashion than I did before. Let's see if I can come up with one. Okay, so this one, whenever a player builds fences, you'll get 1 or 2 wood, depending on how many they build. Fences can be a useful thing early in the game. There's only 1 sheep available right now, so, well, actually, no, they cannot. Fences don't show up until sometime this set of cards. Oh, that's these guys. So, yeah. Seasonal worker. Whenever you use day labor, you get an additional grain. From round 6, you can choose to get vegetables instead. This is a nice option. Sure, day labor provides you with 2 food. You probably aren't going to do that late in the game, but early on, it's a good way to get yourself bootstrapped into the grain game, especially if there's some guy like this sitting around. So that's interesting. Both of these are interesting. Veterinarian. When you play this card, place 4 sheep, 3 wild boar, and 2 cattle in a container. At the start of each round, draw 2 animals. If they're the same, you keep one. Return the 1 or 2 animals to the container. So, animals coming in via the rounds is a little painful because you might end up killing them if you don't have space for them. Right now there are no fences, so this is out of the question, I think, compared to these others. Maid. Once you've built a clay hut, place 1 food on each remaining round space. At the start of these rounds, you get the food. you know, food is most useful early in the game, but this might be a nice supplement that makes it so you know, while you're working as a maid, you don't have to convert anything to food, so you can concentrate on victory points. Academic. This card counts as 2 occupations for minor improvements when scoring the Reeve occupation card. Well, I don't have the Reeve card. Probably not that big a deal. But if I need to boost up for a minor improvement, maybe. Village Beauty. This is an occupation. At any time, you can pay 3 food to take the family growth action without placing one of your family members. You must have room in your home. Next, you can use the new barn to take actions from the following round. Wow, that's nice. Again, maybe not that big a deal right away, but there's no family growth option right now. So I could get a boost on building up a large family. And the more people you have, the more actions you take. The more actions you take, the more resources you're able to generate. Now, early on, when there aren't that many actions, you may not want to boost way high, but this is kind of intriguing. The problem, of course, is 3 food to get that, and I have to start building my hut. One thing that's nice about it is I can build my hut out of wood and then do the upgrades, which are cheaper out of the other materials. Taster. Whenever another player is the starting player, you can pay him or her 1 food at the start of the round and be the first to place a family member. After that, play starts with the starting player as usual. Ooh, that's intriguing as well. There's an advantage to being the starting player. Now, it's only 1 food to be able to get a jump in and go first. And that's almost certainly worth it whenever possible. So this is a nice set of occupations again. If I want an occupation right now, though, I have to pay a food. Are any of these worth it? The day laborer gets additional grain. There's no sow activity, but whenever another player builds fences, you get wood. Whenever another player is the starting player, you get this. I'm not absolutely certain that I want to be this to take an occupation yet. I might. Let's take a look at some of these, because I can do an improvement and become the starting player for the next phase. Also, it helps understand. So this takes 2, I think that's food, looks like it. Place 1 wood on each of the remaining even-numbered rounds. At the start of these rounds, you receive the wood. Well, that's pretty good, actually. Spices, no cost whatsoever. Whenever you convert vegetables to food in a fireplace, cooking hearth, or cooking corner, you receive an additional food. Yeah, it may be useful at some point. I'd need a couple of occupations for this. Whenever you use fishing, you get an extra food and a reed. Yeah, that's cool, but can't do it now, and maybe not. 5 stone for a paved road. The player with the most valuable street receives 2 bonus points when scoring. What? Okay. There are apparently roads. So this is worth 2 points, and I think 2 more points at the end of the game if it's the most valuable. It's an expensive card, though. Late game choice. Lasso takes a reed. You can place exactly 2 people immediately after one another. If at least one of them uses a wild boar, cattle, or sheep action space. Well, there's a sheep action space right now. And some restrictions from the 5-player game. I don't think there are any... there are additional actions in the 5-player game that are different. Interesting. Not sure. Sleeping corner. I need 2 grain fields. I don't have that, but this is... You can use any family growth action space even if another player's already placed a person there. That's intriguing, but this makes it a little less, because this allows me at any time I can do this. So as long as I create space, it just costs me an extra food. Having the slut seems useful. I'm sorry, the village beauty. Somehow I don't think that's the issue there. Wood for a stable. When you play this card, immediately build one stable. The stable doesn't cost anything. Now this card has these arrows, which means you pass it to the player on your left. Since I'm going opposite normal order, it'll be to the right. Stable does not cost anything, but you must pay the cost on the card. It's an intriguing card. Probably don't want to do it yet. Doesn't give you any points, but it gives you a stable, you know. And you would be doing a minor improvement for that. This is intriguing because it will produce wood for me for the rest of the game. And only cost me 2 food. However, if I take that, I'll be getting starting player, I'll be paying the food, and I won't be getting as good an early start as if I just go here and grab those 3 wood. So I think that's better. And we'll go here, and again, you know, because of the amount of time I'm investigating each player, we will not be doing this for the full game, obviously. I'm going to assume I kind of remember these cards. I won't, but I won't be looking them up on camera every time. But I think it's important to get kind of a view of what the players' options are and what they're looking at in the long term. To our 3rd player in sequence and see what the hell they got. So occupation, grocer, pile, 1 vegetable, reed, clay, wood, vegetable, stone, grain, reed on top of this card. At any time you can buy the top item for a food. That's a pretty nice deal. Most of these items are worth a food. And grain is useful right away. Unfortunately, I have to pay an additional food to get the occupation. Food's going to be in short supply if I have that card and I'm buying from it regularly. So let's look at some more. Hut builder. Play this card during stage 1. That's right now. At the start of round 11, you can extend your hut by 1 room at no cost as long as you have not yet renovated to a stone house. That's really nice. Has to use it now. Gives me a free upgrade, which could be quite expensive. Yeah, well, it is expensive. It would be 5 clayer wood and 2 reeds. Very, very appealing. Very appealing. And I will need some sort of marker to remind me of that. I don't think I'm going to use these with particular things. I think I'm going to use these to try to indicate stuff like that. Peace worker. Whenever you receive wood, clay, reed, stone, or grain on an action space, you can buy 1 more of the same good for a food. Whenever you receive vegetables, you can buy 1 more for 2 food. Again, wow, that's an appealing option. I like these. I just don't know if I want to spend a food right now to grab it. This I can build, you know, later in stage 1, but this one, wow. Again, it's a cost of food. So I've got a lot of resource capabilities. And by the way, these were shuffled and dealt out, you know, not in packs where things were similar or anything. Tenant farmer. You immediately receive a loan of 1 of each type of animal. Before scoring, return the 3 animals. For each animal that you cannot or do not want to return, you lose a point. I don't know how much I like that. It's fairly easy to get animals from my feeling, and I'd rather have a full block of animals at the end rather than, so they say before scoring, they don't say how much, I'm assuming immediately. If you could pay them back through the course of the game when you no longer need those animals, that would be great, but I don't get the feeling that that's what's intended. Before scoring is ambiguous, though, so who knows. Mother of twins. When your family grows, you can pay 3 food to bring 2 new family members instead of 1. You need only have space for 1 family member in your home. That's pretty powerful, but a later in the game thing, definitely. Farm steward. Once you live in a clay hut or stone house, you play your next family growth action as family growth even without a room. Again, another powerful opportunity for me to stack additional people. Now, family growth without a room, I don't remember if it limits you to 2 people per room. It would be possible that you could like have a 2-room house with tons of people with what this guy's doing. Wooden hut builder. At the end of the game, you receive 1 bonus point for each room in your wooden hut. Well, that's nice. Because you can avoid upgrade costs and get the same value as clay. And we've got this here. There's some interesting stuff going on there. Okay. I don't know. It might be worth a food to buy one of these earlier guys. Got to keep in mind that wooden hut builder, he makes it not unreasonable for me to avoid upgrading. Generally, you want to upgrade, but if I can get a point without upgrading, and there's no real advantage to stone there, is there? However, didn't I have a Yeah, so I have a conflict between farm steward and wooden hut builder. Wooden hut builder makes wooden huts better. Farm steward makes it so that I might be able to have a rather large family in very little space. Now, I can definitely have 4 people in 2 rooms. The only question is whether I can have a 5th person in those 2 rooms. And I think the answer is yes, but that's going to be something I have to look up if I manage it. So let's start taking a look at some of these. This requires that I not have occupations. So this is maybe a now. When you play this card, take a food for each completed round of the game. Ew. And then you pass it. I mean, it's not worth taking an action just to get a food. If I could wait long enough, maybe. But avoiding an occupation is a painful thing, especially when I have this. Broom. I can spend a wood to discard all of my minor improvements and draw a new hand of them. Obviously, not what I want to do yet, if I have any that I want. Granary. Okay, this is nice. I think this is an ore. I can pay 3 wood or 3 clay, and this allows me to place a grain on each space for rounds 8, 10, and 12, and then I get the grain on those turns. It's also worth a victory point. Not something I'm hurrying to get, but possibly of interest. Mansion. At the end of the game, you get 2 points for each room in your stone house. This is really expensive. If you have a big stone house, though, it's worth calling it a mansion. Wood cart, I'd need 3 occupations, and it costs 3 wood. Whenever I use a person to take wood on any action space, I get an extra wood. By the time I'm in position to take advantage of this, I might not be grabbing wood that often. So, kind of iffy. Greenhouse needs an occupation, 2 wood. Add 4 and 7 to the current round and place a vegetable on each of those. Then you can pay a food to take the vegetable. That's a good deal. Converting vegetables, growing vegetables is a good way to get some victory points. Eating them, not so much, because they convert only to 3 food each, which, I don't know. It's not bad. It's as good as an animal. A plane. When you turn a wood into food using the joinery, sawmill, or cabinet maker, you get an extra food. You can choose instead to turn a second wood into exactly 2 food. gives me a reason to aim for this. This is not a bad card. The Sawmill is a minor improvement that replaces the Joinery and is really, really potent. Is there anything I'm aching for out of these? The Greenhouse isn't bad. Other options? I need to build the hut builder early, like in round 1. These others, maybe later. So I don't have any resources. All my resources take wood. I'm going to grab the 2 wood, and immediately you can see the guy who got 3 wood got a bonus on me. That's life. We'll put the die over here. Let's look at the final player's information before they make their first pick. Animal keeper. You can keep sheep. Great. Wild boar and cattle in the same pasture. This applies to all your pastures. Pretty minor. Usually you can manage to keep your animals properly, I guess. I don't know. Thatcher. Pay 1 reed less to build each room, each renovation, and for certain other buildings here. Yeah, reeds are hard to come by. It's the only one to begin with, and there's other ways. But storehouse clerk. Whenever you have at least 5 stone at the start of a round, you receive an extra stone. If you have at least 6 reed, you get a reed. If you have at least 7 clay, you get a clay. If you have 8 wood, you get a wood. That's nice. But man, it's going to be hard to accumulate those kinds of numbers and delay your gratification, as it were. It's at the start of a round. You have to keep this huge stockpile. It's going to be hard to assemble that kind of stockpile, and then you kind of can't spend it, right? Until it gets big enough that you can spend the excess. Eventually, though, that means you have that huge stockpile to turn around as it's generating quite a few goods potentially. That's a really, really powerful card if you can manage it. I don't know if I can. Mushroom collector. Whenever you use a family member's action to take wood, you can leave 1 of the wood on the space and take 2 food in exchange. Sounds so-so to me. I need to relight. Really, to me, you kind of want the wood. You know, a wood for 2 food. That's probably a fair trade, but I don't know. I'm not all that thrilled for this. Dance instructor. You get 4 food before you pay the costs of playing this occupation. Immediately return the card to your hand. Okay. So, there are no costs to playing an occupation except what's on the event. What this means is I could use this card repeatedly. On the occupation card and get some cash out of it, essentially. Get some food. But the card just goes back in my hand. I don't even get to keep it for count of occupations. It's a way to generate some quick money, sort of, I guess. I don't know. Tanner. When you convert wild boar or cattle to food, you can choose to place them on this card. At the end of the game, you receive bonus points based on the number that you've slaughtered. You don't get the food for them, though, right? You place the food on here, I guess. No, I guess you place the animal on there. Yeah, that's not clear. That could be, that's either a very powerful card or of a type that I'm not sure. Now, I don't know. This is from the K deck, which I don't think I have any information on. Let's try to find it. That's stage. Yeah, this thing is a mess. Here's occupations. Okay. Why does this say stage 5? Oh. So I am looking for a tanner, and I bet you he's not in here. But he might. Tanner. Slaughtered wild boar may either be placed on the tanner or used for the basin maker, not most. Okay, so my feeling is you do get the food. It's a fairly powerful card. You get the food, and you get to keep the skin. That's what reason says. Of course, reason doesn't work. You can convert clay into food at any time. You receive 1 food per clay. Well, that sucks. If any player has built a well, including the village well, you get 3 food for 2 clay. There are a lot of these make stuff into food cards. This is a particularly lousy trade-off. Clay is not as common as wood. The wood one, the joinery here, produces 2 food for every wood. Now, yes, it's more expensive than an occupation, but I'm not sure if there's anything that I'm just dying to put down right away. One of the problems is, to use a lot of these, you have to plan ahead. So, for example, let's say I wanted to use the mushroom collector as just a simple example. Well, there's no wood out there right now, so yeah, there's one. So it's not very attractive, but, you know, next round, there's going to be 3 wood out there. What you'd kind of want to do is be able to play the occupation and then take the advantage of the thing. But even when you try that, you play the occupation, somebody else may grab the thing you wanted. So there's the capability of people to interfere with you, but there's also this sort of, wow, what position is the board going to be in next turn? You know, well, there's going to be 3 wood. Do I want to collect 2 wood? Do I want to spend 2 turns putting this down and collecting the wood to collect 2 wood and 2 food or something like that? And the answer is no, but this allows me to just grab some food. I don't know if any of these really excite me. I've got some stuff that plays with the animals, and then I've got this thing that plays with keeping big stocks of stuff. None of those are thrilling. The big stocks of stuff might be something to try for as a game goal. You know, just that might be my victory route. I need an occupation for this. I can replace 1 or 2 reed with the same amount of clay whenever I extend or renovate my house. So probably the biggest thing about this is it's worth a victory point and doesn't really cost you anything. But I need an occupation before I can play it. Sometimes clay is easier to get than reeds, but clay is also useful for other things. So a beehive. You need 2 improvements and 3 occupations. This has huge requirements. I guess you have to pay a dead insect if you find one. Place 2 food on each remaining even number round space. At the start of each round, you take the food. That's a pretty good generator. However, with all the requirements for it, it maybe, you know, isn't going to come in as early. Somebody had picked one, right? Not him. Somebody had one, and I can't remember who's got what, because obviously I'm not sitting here focusing on my hand of cards for a couple hours straight playing the game. Again, my solo style of play makes it very hard to play these games where you have to remember a lot of information about what you're trying to do for 2 reasons. 1, the breaks, and 2, I'm managing 4 hands at once. The Tavern. Okay. So this is basically a victory point generator. It cost me 2 wood and 2 metal. It's worth 2 victory points, but it also becomes an action. Another player can place his piece there and get 3 food. I can use it and either take the 3 food or score 2 more bonus points. How do I record those points? I don't know. There are no counters to record those points. So, gosh. Riding plow takes 3 occupations. Twice during the game when you use either the plow field or plow field and sow, you can plow 3 instead of 1. Big bonus there. Lots of occupations though, and a fair cost. There's a cheaper one that allows you to do it once that makes a lot more sense to me. It costs like 1 wood. I don't think it has any occupation. Brushwood roof. Whenever you extend or renovate your house, you can replace 1 or 2 reed with wood. Again, the same kind of argument I have with the clay roof, and this is kind of a, gosh, at least this one gives a victory point. Oh, and this requires 3 occupation. Ouch. Schnapps Distillery. This sounds good. 2 victory points. This takes, I think that's a vegetable and 2 stone. During the feeding phase of the harvest, you can use the Schnapps Distillery to convert at most 1 vegetable into 4 food. That's a pretty good trade-off. And it's done as you need it during the feeding phase. At the end of the game, you get a bonus point for your 5th and 6th vegetables. So this would be something, you know, if somebody wants to make carrot schnapps. And a strawberry patch, which requires vegetable fields. Vegetables aren't around yet. And for something to be a vegetable field, it's a field with vegetables in it. Place 1 food on each of the next 3 round phases. At the start of each of these rounds, you get the food. That's not terribly advantageous, but it doesn't cost anything. This one is appealing in terms of building a lot of stuff. It looks like I might be wanting to create vegetables. There's not a lot out there for me. I'm going to grab the clay. Although I can't build these things yet, clay is valuable, and clay is valuable also to building some of these. And that will put us over here, and I'll be back in a bit. The other facets with the game is, anytime someone, takes 1 grade in action, it might be just this one, but there might be others. I think there's just this one, has to pay a food. Well, that's great. But that only works if somebody remembers, right? Now, that's pretty easy right now. There's only 1 card out. But by the end of the game, people are going to have a line of like 8, 10 cards, maybe. You know, they have 14 of them in their hand, and then there's these that are available. And there's actually possibilities to get more in other ways as well. So, you know, there's just going to be a fair number of cards out for each player, and it's hard to remember. So what's up with him? What does he want? What can he do that's of value? That's a good question. A lot of the spaces have been taken up. I don't have a capability to get an improvement. I could grab some resources, but there aren't a whole lot available. I think my most valuable thing is this, which gets me a reed, a stone, and a food. Stones and reeds are both kind of, this is the only way to get stones, and reeds are kind of rare, so yeah, that makes sense. And I clearly didn't have enough money to build an improvement. Maybe I have an improvement that's worth 0, you know? This is the problem. So I don't have any sheep. I've got to do this calculation every time where I look through all my cards and see if there's any that I can play, how much, and then I have to assess how much I want to play each one, and I want to assess that against all these different opportunity spaces that I could take as well. So you've got this constant thrashing calculation of, do we do this, 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 this. Now compare this to, you know, Puerto Rico is an example that I like to bring up because I feel like there's something kind of similar with the role selection, even though that's got its own neat little aspects where like other people get to do it and everything. But you get to look and you say, which one of these 6 things do I want to do right now? Which one am I poised to do? Obviously, that gives you a lot less branching. This becomes a chaotic maze of possibilities. I don't mind a chaotic maze of possibilities if some sort of underlying reality, is on the model. And, so I can look at the East Front and I have tons and tons of, I'd rather not, but I can, just to look at it, I can look at the East Front in Europe during World War II and I have so many different options, and I don't have to examine every single possible configuration of movement that I have, though, because there's some guiding principles like, there's maybe 3 or 4 places, sectors in the front where I could devote my attack. And, what I want to do then to accomplish it, it follows down in a downward pattern. Now, maybe you can do the same thing here. You can say, I want to have lots of sheep because I'm attracted to sheep for the obvious reason. Well, if that's your goal, then maybe what you need to do, you can draw back from that, right? But that's not your goal. Your goal is to optimize the point manifold here, right? So it becomes this entire maze. So unless you impose on yourself something like, I want to have my spaces filled with 4 sheep each, or some ridiculous goal like that, you're not going to be able to very easily trace backwards through the paths as to what options do I have to get sheep. Because, well, one option is I could take a sheep and put it in my house. Another is, well, I can't build any fences, but I can get a wood and put it there. Another is, I need to survive to get my sheep, so I need food, I need to do that now. That's the kind of thinking you have, except you don't have an endpoint that's like, I want lots and lots of sheep. That's stupid, but, obtainable, right? It's obtainable in the sense of, I want Smolensk, It's that kind of thing. You can put it, you can make it concrete. Here, what you're saying is more along the lines of, if you were looking at the entire East Front, and every hex had its own valuation, or many of them did, and they were all pretty close together, and you wanted, to maximize your point value over all those hexes. Now, nobody designs a war game where so many hexes have valuations and whatnot. They abstract the core of the problem, and certain cities are important and some aren't, and whatever. You also don't generally have a victory point salad in war games. A fair amount of them do, but a lot of them are like, cause Russia to collapse. I grabbed the wood last time because that's a commodity and it was the best thing out there. But now on my second try, it's a lot harder. The pickings are scarce. I have this seasonal worker who has the capacity to get me grain and vegetables later. I think I want to devote myself to building, to farming. Which means I'm going to take my other guy and I'm going to plow a field. Could have grabbed food, viable option. I'll just put my field up there. I could put it anywhere, but remember, I got to keep things in blocks. So that gets rid of him. I'll do some thinking there. And this is really how I have to do it. I have to step away, or else you're going to get the video of me reassessing this hand of cards for every single player every single time. That's the whole thing. I have to assess the hand of cards, the play positions here, the board positioning, all sorts of stuff. It's just too complex a problem when you have to shift gears every time, right? I think it's too complex a problem anyway, but that's beyond the point. I mean, I'm not saying it's unplayable or whatever. What I'm saying is that it's simply the amount of effort to keep track of all of this, what I would probably have to do to play one of these games well, one of these worker placement type Euros, is spell out what my plans are on a sheet of paper. And I'm talking about playing not solo, but playing opposed, so that I can remember where I'm going and what I need to do. Spell out all my plots of movement, of choices that I'm planning on making, and why I'm planning on doing what I'm planning on doing. Because I might be able to figure out some grand plan, at least, for that given moment. But then I'm going to forget it. I'm going to forget the ordering, because ordering's important. I have to get the wood before I build the fences. I have to build the fences before I get the sheep. I have to have this many sheep on this turn. I have to have this much food on this turn. All these different constraints that are placed on me. So in order to match them all, I basically have to play the game out in my head, making guesses as to what everybody's going to do. And then, as the world changes, I have to reassess still every time. But at least I'll have that plan in mind, and I won't just be shooting from the hip, trying to go with intuition where there is no reality underlying this that's believable. It's gonna take me 4 food to make it through the first turn. I'm having a little bit of trouble here. So hut builder, I have to get out. I would have to spend a food to get him. Grocer, I have to spend food for that. Instead, maybe I'll get the clear occupation here. I don't think there were any improvements. Uh-oh. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I looked through these. I didn't see anything I wanted. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop it on the day laborer and get myself 2 food. Food is is of higher value right now than it is at any other time in the game, and it's the only thing that I'm getting 2 of. There were other possibilities, but that's where we're going. Player, let's note something interesting. Okay, I forgot what it was. Oh yeah. So I have enough clay, I could build myself a fireplace, which might be really useful later on. It's worth a victory point. It helps me produce food automatically, but here's the problem. There's none of these, whatever they are, major improvements or whatever. There's only minor improvements available right now. I gotta wait to be able to build any of these. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my dance instructor. Before having to pay 1 food, it's my first or second occupation, I get 4. So I'm gonna grab 3 food, which is, better than what the last guy took. And so I judge it a worthwhile thing. So I'm gonna teach these poor peasants who have nothing how to dance. All right. Well, we're not done yet. We gotta find the sequence of play, which is over here. And we try to find it. So we did the work phase. That brings us, and I won't need to do this every time, to the return home phase. Each player's dudes go back to their houses. Oh, I forgot to place. His dude would be over there on that occupation. That has happened to me before, where somebody hasn't placed somewhere and I just forget about it, and it leaves something open and it just creates problems. But anyway, that's that. If we were on a harvest turn, we would harvest, but we're not. Which means we move this die over here to round 2. Now, I completed 1 round that should take maybe 5 or 10 minutes at most for the 4 players, and it has taken quite a bit of time. Why? Well, because I've had to go through all these assessments. Now, ordinary normal people, I guess, who like Euros or something, are able to make these kind of assessments or whatever almost instantaneously, I guess. I've sat with these people. Some of them are like, I don't know what to do. But then they do something. Some of them are like, I don't know what to do and I don't care. That's probably the best way to be. Some of them are like, oh, I do this. Hurry up, I do this. Move it along. And it's like, what the fuck? Welcome to the life of analysis paralysis. It does not bother me when there's a reality behind the things, but it's very hard for me to take. I'm not sure it would be as hard to take a fully abstract problem, although I have to say Bizarre, a resource exchanging game by 3M. That's really, really a clever game. I'm horrible at it for the same kind of reasons, having to try to figure out the chaining of actions. That's a difficult thing for me to do mentally, I guess. And that's really where the heart of it is. And it's just a miserable experience. Anyway, but that game I respect greatly. It doesn't pretend to be about anything. It's about exchanging shapes. It's not trying to hide. It's not trying to say, well, wood sounds important, and it is, but I mean, it's only important because of the cards that are out and how it factors. And I have to say, it's hard. It's really hard for me to really get a grasp on what the problem is, because something like Dominion or Magic, where I can chain a lot of effects together, I don't have the same kind of problem in. I don't know exactly what's gripping this. The tableau of effects that are out, I can handle this size. This size is maybe too big, and that may be the thing. Dominion keeps it down to 10 cards. It keeps it within the realm where I can kind of hold an idea in my head. I also don't have a lot of options in Dominion because I have to pay a cost. It's like when I look at my cards and there's only like 3 of them I can play. Well, that's fine. 3 of them I can play. I can make a choice between 3 or saving up for something else. What's hard is it's 3 of them I can play in conjunction with playing with one of these and in competition with all of the other spaces that are out there. It's getting too big. The problem is too big for me. But it's not so big that I don't think that I can solve it by analyzing the game completely at any given moment. Even if I get caught in a loop of analysis, which is the true analysis paralysis for me, it's not where I'm successfully analyzing the game and being absolutely clever with it. I actually don't mind that. What I mind is that I get caught in these loops and can't figure out what to do, even though I am expending all this effort trying to figure out what the board state's going to be. I'm going to load this up because I think as anything, an example of why and how analysis paralysis impacts at least me and probably quite a few other people. I'm sure that there are other people who are tagged with that phrase for different reasons. The person who thinks for a long time and is always effective. That's something different. What you're going to see with me is that I spin my wheels a lot and come up with horrible solutions and play poorly. Anyway, let's send this up.